got a set of questions at home, but I'm going to get off a little bit. When I mentioned the pasture train, seeing all the people getting off from all over and stuff.
First Sunday there'd be 5,000–6,000 people. You couldn't walk.
Oh, I definitely won't get first Sunday in May, and Primitive Baptist Church is where that all started from. That church up across the blue.
That Primitive Baptist Church.
Interesting fact, you may already know this. You've heard of Democracy in America. Alex Tocqueville.
Heard of what?
The book. You know, Alex Tocqueville wrote around in the early 1800s, Democracy in America. Well, he was a French writer, and he come and toured America to discuss our democracy. It's very famous. Very, very famous. He told us how we were. And you are 91, right?
Sir, not yet. 91 the 10th of March.
Okay, this interview is with Mr. Virgil Hurt, 91 years old, and it's the interview takes place on June 14th, 2004. Appreciate this, Mr. Hurt. Appreciate you sitting down to do this with us. We've got some very interesting details for us. Tell me a little about yourself.
Well, not much to tell. I worked for the unit. I got married in 1934. Got out of school in 32. Got married in Christmas of 34. And I worked for the wholesale house, I don't know, 7, 8 years. The old wholesale house, drove truck for the wholesale house.
Hang on just a second, if you don't mind. Can we start this over? Can you take over that?
It don't matter.
Or just let it go. We got enough time. I wish you'd tell a story about your dad hearing you moving there. That's great about the hotel.
Okay.
Maybe I should have asked it about where you were born and raised and how you came to Brucetron. So we'll start over. Okay. Mr. Hurt, tell me a little about where you were born and raised and how you ended up in Brucetron.
I was born in Martin, Tennessee, 1913, and my dad worked a hardware store in Martin at that time. And on the war come, and I was, I don't know, 6, 7 year old. When the armistice was signed, I can remember that. I guess one reason because I had a picture of it for myself and my mother and somebody standing there blew the horns and the whistles all blew and the bells rung. And then after that, Daddy come. They had a strike on the railroad up here in Brucetron. And Daddy come up here and got the air-ups coming up to get a job. So he come over and got a job at the railroad in 1922. And when I was about 10 years old, I imagine, Daddy, when he first come to Brucetron, he lived at the hotel over the Hollow Rock. And walked down the railroad. There wasn't no town in Brucetron. He walked down the railroad to the roundhouse where he worked, which is about, I don't know, 2 or 3 miles, 2 miles, I guess. And I went with him to work, stayed with him. I stayed with him 2 days, stayed at that old hotel. And at that time, it was just the railroad and there's a channel of water on both sides of the railroad all the way down to Brucetron. And then later, they started building houses in Brucetron in 1925. The railroad company built houses and they sold them to the employees. And Daddy bought a lot, had a house built on Hemlock Street. That's the first street above it where the old ice plant was. And then in January the 4th, 1925, no, 1925. In 1925, Daddy got married again. And my sister and myself, my mother had been dead for years. My sister and myself had been living with his aunts and uncles and hired people in first one place and another. And at that particular time, we lived with my grandmother. But he got married on January the 4th, 1925, and moved his family, which is myself and my sister, up to Brucetron, that new house. And that's when I come to Brucetron. And I went to work, went to school at the old grammar school, Brucetron Grammar School, sitting where the nursing home is now located, in the 5th grade. I went to 5th, 6th grade there, and then we moved down to the Old Baptist Church, and I went to 7th grade in the Old Baptist Church. Then we moved from there up to, on the 8th grade, we lived in a little house just above where the Blue Dip is now, just across about 2 houses up there. And part of that year, the 8th grade, that started the 8th grade, and then part of it we finished up at the new high school, I think in 1929. Then I graduated, went to high school there then, and graduated in 1932 from high school. And I went to work. I got married in 34. Daddy had moved out on the farm at that time. He moved over in May 1931. And 1931, yeah. And I went to school last year in high school. I drove back and forth from over there to Brucetron to go to high school.
Do you
Finished high school.
Do you, I hate to interrupt you, but going back to school, do you remember the names of some of the teachers and superintendent and so
Well, I
forth?
went over in the 8th grade. Of course, the 8th grader wasn't paying much attention to anything. I think E.E. Wright was still superintendent of the school, and E.V. Cooper. And when I started in high school the next year, why, Mr. Cooper, and he was math teacher, and Mr. Wright was superintendent, and Ms. Graham Funderburg was English teacher. And that's all I remember at that time. There was Miss Margaret Smith. I don't know if Red Smith's sister used to live up there.
Yes, sir.
She was a French teacher during high school years. And that's the only really ones that I remember, except French. We had one very different, but I had 3 or 4 different ones, coaches and stuff like that.
Okay. When you were in school, what did you do for entertainment in this area? I mean, what would a typical date be like, or if you got out with friends?
I didn't have time to date. I was good friends with the man that built the ice plant down there, Mr. Rogers. He lived in the first house, so we got a house sitting there now across from where the ice plant was destroyed. I guess you know where that was.
Yes, sir.
But the ice plant was a big business at that time. And I was just around, I went to school, I was 12 years old when I come to Brucetron. I was 14 or 15. I worked every Sunday and Saturday at the platform selling ice. That's the way I made my spending money. I didn't go to the pool hall up there where all the rest of the boys congregated. I was a loner. I stayed there and worked. And I worked for him, and I helped deliver ice in the summertime with the old wagon. They would go around Brucetron delivering ice, and I helped the truck where they delivered ice. They had a delivery driver every day. So I spent most of my time that way. But that was before I got married. After I got married, I didn't do anything. I just, like I said, I worked for the wholesale company. And in 1941, I bought out the Texaco service station there where the butcher block is now. And I run that for a year and part of February, until February of 42, I went to work for Virgil Hurt. Then I sold out.
Okay, so you sold out of the service station and went for the railroad, went to work for the railroad in 42.
February 42.
Could you tell us a little bit what the railroad was like when you went to work and how you went to work there and sort of your career with the railroad?
It was a mixed up affair. All the people that worked were young people that just hired in. And most of them was military age. Only reason I got my job, I was 26 and I was 26 in the Army, one of them 24. I was just a little bit ahead of them all the time through, and I was also married and had a child. And so I worked there. But everybody on the railroad was new. The people, the older being there, the old ones, had been called back and hadn't worked the railroad in 10 or 12 years. And all working on train orders. The old engines were worn out. And it was hectic. Traffic, military traffic. Trains and stuff just one right after another. They got to run trains 10 minutes apart. So if you got trouble on the hill, the man on the rear had to hit the ground running to keep getting run over. We had a whole lot of wrecks from run in. We had done out pretty good because everybody said it was brand new. And them old engines was wore out too. We didn't have no engines until several years later. It wasn't but just 2 or 3 stroker engines. They had just self-fired engines. They had to fire them all by hand. And most of them were small engines. And if you carried over 30 cars, you had to have 2 engines to pull them. And then they come along with diesels then several years. Well, just before we got the diesels, they bought about 10 or 12 what we call stripes. Big, ultra-modern diesel engines. And they were, well, they'd run 100 miles an hour. They'd put a pretty good sized train. But then they just discarded them when the diesel about 1931. Let's see, no, 19. Well, Daddy worked for the railroad company. He quit. I can't remember just exactly when it was. When the diesels comes, when he quit. He got retired. He retired at that time. And they'd take the diesels, and one diesel, they'd put 2 together, and them old engineers used to run them steam engines, just pull them 2, just one, not pull the train 2. The They said, well, you can't run between here and Nashville with two engines. Now they go to 6 or 7, so you just didn't know how to handle them.
Yes.
But that's just it was a pretty rough railroad. Then they come on down to CTC, Central Traffic Control, built a tower there, and all the railroad from Brucetron to Memphis centralized. Brakeman didn't have to throw a switch or nothing. They threw them all up in the office. They lined all the switches to close the back and to put you in the track when they wanted to, the same way to Nashville. And then the L&N took over the railroad. And when they did, they done away with that road from Brucetron to Memphis, the ultra-modern railroad. That Central Traffic Control done away with it and went back to train orders. They'd go with the old NC route down to McKenzie and go around the Y there and go on the old L&N track into Memphis.
Okay, sir. Tell me a little bit the names. I know that Brucetron, one reason it became such a big depot and station was because it was north-south, east-west connection. Tell me a little about the different railroads, that why they built it and centralized in Brucetron.
That was the purpose of Brucetron. They had what they call the Paducah and Memphis division. It run from Paducah to Memphis. That's just like a separate railroad. It still belonged to the L&N, to the NC and St. L. And the NC and L had the Nashville division, which went from Nashville to Hickman, Kentucky. And they met here in Brucetron. Well, they moved the yards from Lexington, P&M loads, large yards from Lexington to Brucetron and consolidated. And that's when they built the yards. And that's when they built the roundhouse, done all that work there. And that was the start of Brucetron.
Okay, so you had the NC and St. Louis, or NCSL, am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Okay, and they ran basically the east-west route?
Yeah.
And then the L&N would have been the, at the time, north-south route?
Practically that.
Okay, good.
See, the Nashville division run from Nashville to Paducah, to Hickman, Kentucky. Then the Chattanooga division, the same railroad, run from Nashville to Chattanooga. See, we worked on the, we were the Nashville division, we worked at seniority on Chattanooga, I reckon on Chattanooga Road Sign.
Okay, the roundhouse down there is a beautiful old structure built, and could you kind of tell us the purpose of the roundhouse and what they did there? And
well, the way they worked and repaired those engines, they had to have some way of turning them. So they built a turntable. The engine drove out on the turntable, and then they turned it around and let it off on whichever track they wanted to. They had about 7, 8 tracks inside the roundhouse, and the rest of them didn't have a cover on them, just pits. Were 4 foot, 3 foot wide or something like that, and about 3 foot deep. But you walk in on it and do something to it. And that's what they call the roundhouse, and that's where that pit that built around that turntable. That's where they repaired all those engines and things. Then they had a car department that worked on
all that passenger trains used to come through a lot, and obviously being a north, south, east, west terminal where the railroads met, and I guess people would change trains there. Could you tell me something about the passenger trains, the people coming in? I think you told me that maybe they had 4 passenger trains met twice a day.
That's right. They had 4 passenger trains met twice a day, and you get about loaded when they come in there. And a lot of people, the whole people rode trains in, and a whole lot of baggage.
You didn't get that when you stopped and start over.
You insisted a whole lot.
You told me people come down and just to watch, and
it'd be a pretty good bunch of people down there every time the train went through. They'd watch them change the baggage and lift all the people. And after several years that way, they even had a public address system. They said trains leaving from track so-and-so.
You're for it now.
Nashville, Memphis, and places like that. Just sound like you're using a Nashville terminal somewhere.
Well, let me kind of start over on the passenger train. We needed all this. I know you told me that one time 4 passenger trains met in Brucetron 2 times a day, and tell me something about the passenger trains and the people. And
well, it was just ordinary trains mostly. They had small engines. They made good time, and then they put on what they called a blue goose. They striped up an engine, kind of put a jacket on it, make it hurt it up a little bit. And it run from here to Memphis and Nashville. It's a pretty hot train. It's a beautiful one of them hot passenger trains. You might have heard of what Panama, but something come out of Nashville on the L&N out around the other way, went around through Paris, around Memphis that way. It was a well-known passenger train. They'd always broadcast it on the radio going up the hill over there somewhere. That train going up the hill In other words, it's just something to create an interest, I reckon. But on the first Sundays in May, why, I would have getting ahead of that. But there'd be this style, if you couldn't walk the people down here that come in here on first Sunday in May.
Yes, I know at one time the first Sunday in May started with the Primitive Baptist Church up here, and I forget exactly when, in the 1800s, they had a foot washing every Sunday, but it turned into more of a commercial event. And I've even read in an old newspaper article where it turned more of a commercial event. They even had gambling and fighting and stuff like that. Could you tell us a little bit about what you know about the first Sunday in May?
Well, first Sunday in May turned out to be just like a carnival. They had stands up and down the sidewalk all the way from the station up to the town. And people just paraded up and down there and buy anything you wanted to there. And they cut across the woods to the old Baptist church. I don't know why they went over there. They wouldn't want to go to church. But there's a great big crowd of people. And that's where the park is now. Automobiles wasn't too plentiful. They would be covered up with buggies and wagons and horses and stuff that rode in there. It just crowded as it could be.
I've also read, and if you remember something about it, what's it, Mr. Stryker that owned a mule that at one time Brucetron became a pretty big mule trading place, or at least he built some.
Stringer.
Stringer?
Stringer.
What do you remember about him?
Well, he used to run right across from where the Blue Dip is now. Used to be a big old cotton gin there. This old part of it still standing. Right behind that cotton gin, right on down the corner, that's where the big stables was, where he sold his mules and stuff. And he run one there. I traded his horses with mules at the time too.
Yes, I heard he had turned into what was a pretty big
And he also worked the railroad. He worked as my engineer on a switch engine for several years.
Okay, do you remember?
Ham Stringer was his name.
Ham Stringer. What do you remember about some of the businesses in town when they got started, or how, the growth of the town?
Well, Miss Fanny, she, I think really, she run the restaurant right there at the first building on the west side of the street. And then they had a barbershop next to it. No, they had a dry goods store next to it run by McGee. And they lived upstairs over the dry goods store, and I reckon that she lived upstairs over their restaurant. And they had a little barbershop in there about 10 feet wide, run in there. And then they had
Do you remember who owned the barbershop at the time?
well, I might go back too far, but that's what I get over there. You can't think of the name you want to. If you could call the name, I can give it to you.
Well, I think there were some Herndon brothers that had barbershops. I didn't know if they were the original ones.
I don't know whether it's the original one, but they run one for years and years and years there. And then that Parks boy from Hollow Rock, he cut hair while one of the boys quit or something. Died. But then the Clyde Jordan used to run, when Tornado hit Brucetron, he was running the restaurant on the next building up there. They tore that down, and it got on up on that side of the street. Over across the street, we had the, well, back early, post office where the senior citizen building was now, in that building. And a grocery store in the next building. Parks, Willard Parks run in Red Larkin, run that store there, the grocery store.
Oh, so Willard run that.
Him and Red Larkin were partners. And then they had a shoe shop. Mr. Mathis run a shoe shop right next door to it. And then the German Casino, whatever, run the group, he's a German, run then they had I forgot what come next. But then C.A. Jordan run a big furniture store, and of course started out as a grocery store, but it grew into a furniture store. He had 3 or 4 buildings there, and he done a big, huge business. And then they had another store up there. It was another grocery store. Hill's run the Hill brothers, Doc Hill and Ben Hill. They run that grocery store there. Later on, when it went out of business, they just sold it when it went out with it. But that started out It was a long time before the hills come up here.
And do you remember anything about Mr. Doris Orr had maybe a 5 and dime?
The 5 and dime was between the Jordan's grocery store and this grocery store. I mean, between Jordan's grocery store. Well, Hills, to tell the truth, that Hills didn't run the grocery store until after C.A. Jordan had quit. Then they run a grocery store. He was a furniture store now. But he had a dime store right there and had a good business there. Had a good soda fountain and everything. It was very popular with young people. He was a good mixer and he had a good business.
Do you remember the first pharmacy and who started that?
Well, I don't know just exactly when he covered it. I just paid him over, but he was been when I was a boy. A fellow named Smith running long years ago.
And then I think some Wiles maybe run it at one time, or was it Wiles drugstore or something?
It probably was. I don't know.
Reddy McGee's uncle, when it had a soda fountain there, and then of course Taylor Hopper.
Yeah, Taylor Hopper run it until right here recently. It hadn't been many years since Taylor Hopper went out. Never did have many years since he went out. He died. Well, then it's been sold 2 or 3 times since he.
Do you remember they used to have a theater down there where roughly where maybe exactly where the Senior Citizen Center is, and it burnt, and they built a new fine theater up where the building still stands now. Can you tell me anything in the history of the movie theater in Brewster?
I guess I could, but I don't remember it. I'll be frank with you, I don't remember it. The first thing I began to remember was they had the post office was there, and they had a funeral place down below it, where they, old Huntington had a funeral, or down where they worked on people.
Do you remember who had the first funeral home, the owners?
Z. Breyer.
Yes, ma'am.
Z. Breyer.
Okay. In 1952, there was a tornado that we briefly touched on that hit Brewston. You have any recollections of the tornado in 52?
Very familiar with it. I was working on a switch engine that night. It happened somewhere just a few minutes before 11 o'clock when it hit Brewston. And we got off about time, and the rain was just coming down the barrels. And we drove up to the top. I got off from work, and the conductor I was working with, J.E. Moody, got in my old big truck. I had a big old cattle truck with high sides on it. And drove up to about where the senior citizen is now, and as far as you couldn't go no further because all them buildings had the whole road. And I turned around to the right and went around behind the buildings on the west side. And I had a brother who lived in the first house down just below the old water pit, the water tank. And it blew his house, blew the top of it off, and just left the floor sitting, and it turned the floor upside down. And his daughter, about three-year-old, something like that, was in that crib under that house. And we finally got enough men around there to pick up there, and me and another boy from across the road, I can't remember his name now, we crawled in on her, and he found her, he got to her first, and she wasn't hurt. The pillars and blankets and everything, he just settled on around her, and she was all right. But my brother come out with a broken leg, and his wife got a bad cut place on her leg. And the next day after when we got that cleared up, I went up, my daddy was living over on the Pine Street, out there, Hemlock and Pine, and he was living there. So I got in the truck and was going to come around there and see how they was getting along. And from all the old Baptist church down, the telephone lines was all down the road. I drove the truck as far as I could, just breaking the lines loose, it's all rotten anyway. And finally I couldn't get no further, so I turned to the east and went around and come back out that way. And finally I got the truck home all right. And Daddy and them was all right, they hadn't bothered their place. I got my car and went back to town. One of my brothers was there, my daddy's, and picked him up, and we went and got my brother that had his neck broke, Lewis Hurt, and carried him to the doctor's office over Huntington, and carried his wife with him, and the little girl was all right. She stayed with some of the neighbors across the road over there. And the next morning, Steve Breyer said, well, I'm too busy. It rained all day. The next day was Saturday. It rained all day long, just as hard as it could rain. And he said, I cannot take him to Nashville now. He just give us, my brother was a truck driver, 18-wheeler, the truck driver, plowed Martin, and he drove the ambulance, and we carried my brother up to Nashville to the Veterans Hospital. And that just about clears it up. But they tore up Brucetron completely, just about. I was living here at that time, here, not this house, another house.
Okay, going back to some businesses, I believe there's sort of unique for Brucetron business, the trolley car. What do you remember about that? I understand that one time it was on the highway. I remember it as being next to the sewing factory, as when Lois Parks bought it and turned it into the patio. Could you tell me anything about that?
I remember the story. It was right at the end of the old wholesale house, going down the like walk toward where Butcher Lock is now. And it was an old streetcar or something similar to that. And it run a little feed shop in there.
Mm-hmm. And the owner of that was?
But Parksville only at one time, I don't know how many owned it.
Okay. And then do you remember when they moved it? I think John Eldon French owned it one time, and then maybe Lois Parks moved it up by the factory and called it the patio. Yeah. Do you remember about when that happened?
Well, I'm not too familiar with patio. I'm with the church factory because my brother was foreman up there all the years he was up there, Lewis Hurt. But I didn't know hardly any of the people who worked at the church factory because they all come from Cameron, Big Sandy, and Cedar Grove, on out down toward Nashville. We went about Buchanan on above Buchanan. They had a whole lot of people working there. I don't know. I didn't know the people. I just do the railroad now.
Okay. On the history of Highway 70, I think I read what they call it Broadway of America, and it was the most used highway at the time between New York and Los Angeles. And you were telling me earlier that you remember when there wasn't a Highway 70 that running through Brucetron. Could you tell me a little about Highway 70?
Well, I was fortunate at 7-year-old. I went with my father to visit some people in Denver, Tennessee. And he bought an old car there, and we drove that car back. He drove it back to Martin, and two of them boys came with us to help us out. We went through the Natchez Trace area and come out from Buchanan down that road there and come out to Ottawa Rock into 70 at Ottawa Rock. At that time, it was in process of construction. They had most of the gravel on the road, but they didn't have the culverts and stuff in, and we'd have to go down and drive around the culverts to get on down there. I remember that very well because we spent the night over on the side of the road, a pond, and some fellow come by a wagon the next morning, woke us up. But that's what long about that. And that was, I guess, about 23, I guess. I was 7 years old. I was born in 13. I make it about.
Well, moving forward a little bit.
1920, somewhere like.
When Brucetron was thriving, I have read the quote somewhere that you could see license plates from every state in the country coming through. Do you remember anything about?
It was a main thoroughfare. There's no question about that. It was a main thoroughfare because there wasn't any other roads. The interstate wasn't thought about being built, and there wasn't no road up there except the old Natchez Trace Trail. And of course, they've rebuilt it now, and it's been paved for both sides. It didn't always go where the old pecan tree was up there. That was just a foot and a wagon path mostly. So there wasn't no roads up that direction. The railroad all went on the low ground, put the railroads in so we wouldn't have to climb so many hills, and that's where the roads went. And then later on it didn't make no difference, so they built them. That's where they put the interstate.
You said you were at one time in the service station business, but then you got in the railroad. I know at one time there were several service stations in the 40s, 50s, and 60s in Brucetron. Tell me about, do you remember the owners and how many different gas stations they would have had?
Well, up on the highway, we had a doctor's office. Now, first we had a restaurant at the call his name for me. Bootlegger. French. Johnny French. He ran a restaurant right there on the corner where the old doctor's office was, next to Key's house. And then we had a warehouse, the wholesale house, a big warehouse right behind him. And then they had a couple of empty stores. Anyway, Womack had a dry goods store on the other end of it, on that little section in there. And across the road from that, where the big four, where the outlet store is now, it used to be an outlet store, there was a service station there. And I don't remember who run it, but it had a restaurant right beside of it. And I can't think of the people's name now that run that. They had a little restaurant on the side, a pretty good sized restaurant. And that was about the first restaurant in Brucetron, the truth about it. That was back even before the days when Johnny French had it over there. It was earlier. That was real early. And Val Darnell run that service station there, across the road there, when I first come to Brucetron.
Okay, but let's fast forward up to say the 50s. Can you remember? I know the service station that you used to run, it was a service station for years where the butcher's block is. Right down below what used to be motor parts, there's a service station, and where Troy's mother sells cars. I think there were several stations. Do you remember much about?
Well, we had an automobile dealer, sold Hudson automobiles, just across from the butcher block. Just right across the street on Butcher, from block to Butcher block. And then had a dry cleaning company down next to that.
Was that Mr. Levi Parrish?
Yeah, Levi Parrish. Across the road where Troy's mother sells his cars now, they had a Jenkins garage. He lived right behind the garage.
Do you remember roughly when Mr. Parrish started his dry cleaning business?
No, I can't give you no accurate.
Recollection.
It was, I think when I run the service station, he was running it then, that 41.
Okay, so he was in business a long time there. Any interesting characters or any interesting stories? You've already covered quite a bit of history here with a tornado or anything that you can remember?
Well, a tornado, we don't have more of them.
No, sir.
And they go down to senior citizens and Hopper trade a whole bunch of pictures of it. You can get you some pictures there on the wall of senior citizens of the building. That tells, just to show you what it looked like. And of course, I told you before that senior citizens, we always meet there on the first Tuesday and have a free for just supper or dinner, in other words. And then the second Sunday, second Tuesday, usually go out and eat somewhere at a restaurant or something because they give us door prizes, a meal or something like that. And then the third Sunday, we have a birthday. And of course, that's coming up tomorrow, third Tuesday. We have a birthday. And that, we meet about 2 o'clock and we have a birthday party, have ice cream and cake. That's
okay. I know that Brucetron used to have some doctors and I believe a dentist at one time. Could you tell me anything about those?
Yeah, we've had a dentist at the time. I don't remember his name though. We've had an eye doctor there too one time. He come over here from Paris. He went back to Paris. But we had old Dr. Deveopment up right where the antique shop is now. That's his old house. And then we had Dr. Hicks. He had his office over where the bank is now. And he was our doctor. But those two doctors, of course, he rode in a buggy out in the country. They go out to your home. And his road was about that time when he first started. He couldn't hardly get around nowhere.
And then I think Dr. Keaton.
He come there a year years later. The other two doctors that now gone when he come there.
Okay, so the first two probably would have been Hicks and
yeah.
Okay, and Dr. Lawrence built a, I guess a small hospital office. Do you remember about when that was?
Sometime after church factory started. I don't know exactly when it was.
Okay, and I understand at that time above that building was a boarding house for ladies, and below was sort of a, I guess, beer joint and a one-lane bowling alley. Do you remember much about the dugout?
I never was in that, and I can't tell you anything about that. Several of my friends had to get a divorce over it, but that's history too.
Do you remember when they quit selling beer in Brucetron? You know, they passed a law. Of course, obviously they could sell it then.
I don't remember that. We didn't have no beer back in the early days. had what they call home brewed. Everybody made home brew at home and drank it. And we had a place out, Will Preston's place out on Highway 70, and he sold beer and bootleg. But he stayed busy all year. Didn't nobody ever bother.
At one time I understand, I can't remember one of them, we had 2 taxi services. I remember Mr. Percy Yates had one, and maybe someone else at the time.
I don't remember the other. They had more than one at one time.
They did have Mr. Percy Yates.
Yeah.
And
see, those railroad men, they'd be staying out somewhere and they'd be called and they'd get to ride a taxi. They thought I stayed over at Cameron at that motor court there on 70s, just on the left before we get to Cameron.
yes, sir, and I think Mr. Yates had a sideline with his taxi business. Didn't
Well,
he?
I've heard that, yeah. We had plenty of people first flying spirits.
Okay, well, Mr. Hurt, it's been a pleasure, and glad to see you're in such good health, and you've been a wealth of information for me, and good luck to you, and hope you stay in good health, and I appreciate all you've done.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. Great, wonderful.